Today we're going to be making fettuccine alfredo with fresh pasta. So to begin, we need 400 grams of AP flour plus 4 eggs, and this will make about a serving of about 6 portions. So here in this recipe I'm doing a larger double batch, but make sure that if you do this larger batch that you do take your time to mix it. So we're going to take our eggs first and we're going to crack them into a separate bowl. If any shells break in there, make sure you get them out. And we're going to use about 1 egg per 100 grams of flour. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to sift it. So if you don't have one of these sifters, you can use a strainer. I didn't have a bigger one here, but you can use any kind of these mesh strainers just to kind of lighten and get all the lumps out of the flour. Now in the videos that we watched prior, there were different flours that chefs used, the 00 flour, semolina flour. I didn't have those available, so I'm just doing straight AP flour. And the recipe came out really delicious and tender. So make a well in the middle of the flour and break up your eggs and start to mix them in. Be really careful that you are doing this with like the walls around the eggs so that this doesn't spill all over your counter and floor. So very carefully start to incorporate a little bit of flour at a time using the fork, making sure you don't have anything spilling all over the place, and start to incorporate it until it becomes a dough. So at some point it's going to be a little difficult to use your fork. It's going to start to really pick up and be a dough. So at that point you can switch over to your hands. So you can also use a bench scraper as another great tool to use to scrape up all of the flour and to help you mix and incorporate. So just squeeze it, move it together, start to knead it. Again, this was a double batch, so it was a very difficult batch to really, knead by hand. So after I kind of got it all together, I split it up into 2, and then I work each individual half by itself. It just made it a little bit more manageable. So we'll bring this all together, we'll knead it. Okay, and you can see the difference between a kneaded dough and one that still needs to be worked, right? Very smooth. It bounces back when you press it in. So we're going to wrap that nice and tightly in plastic, and then we'll work on our second dough and get that to become nice and smooth. This process takes about 8 to 10 minutes in order for it to get done. And here you can see we're just folding it over and pushing it out with the palm of our hands. If you have a mixer, that will go much faster, but quite frankly, making pasta by hand really just has such a great feel to it, and you really get to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So take the time, do it by hand, feel the difference on how the dough is developing, and really be proud and enjoy your final product. So we'll wrap this one up as well in plastic. We'll just press that down, wrap it nice and tight to keep it from drying out. And that's it, flour and eggs, and we're ready to have our pasta. So we're going to take these 2 items and we're going to put them in the fridge for about 30 minutes. This allows the dough to get nice and cold. It allows the gluten to relax and gives us an opportunity to get set up for the next part. So I'm going to cut my dough into pieces. The first one I'm going to show you is to roll it with a rolling pin or roll it by hand. I have a large rolling pin which became a little difficult to use, so I switched to my French rolling pin, which I like to use so I have better control over. The only thing about doing this by hand is that it's very hard to get the dough really super thin. So take your time, really press it out, play with maybe add an extra egg if you find it was too tough. You'd have to do that on the next batch though. But I found it very difficult to roll this out and get it as thin as I really, really wanted to. But certainly with a little bit of time and effort, you can get it to that point. So I did one piece just to show you this. If you didn't have a rolling pin, you can use an olive oil bottle, really anything that you're able to clean off and then be able to roll it with a little bit of pressure. So now that we've gotten it nice and thin, we're going to go through hand cutting this pasta. Okay, so we're just going to roll it up nice and loosely. We're going to trim one edge off, cut it in half, line it up, trim the other edge, and now I can go ahead and start slicing it. Nice even pieces. Fettuccine is just a little bit wider, more of a flat noodle in comparison to spaghetti. And then once I have cut them all, I'll just simply kind of toss them with my hands, put a little bit more flour on there to help dry it out, and then I'll set it aside while I get ready for the next steps. And that's my fettuccine. So now the next couple pieces of dough, I'm going to use my KitchenAid attachment and I'm going to roll it out. Now you can use a hand attachment. It's a type of machine that is manual that you just clip to the countertop. I happen to have a KitchenAid and the attachment, so this is what I was using. And you can see as I keep on putting it through, we're going to start on the widest setting just to start to get it thin. I'm going to run it through 3 times and then I'm going to drop it down. There's numbers or dials on the side that make the rollers thinner. So as I am working it, I will continue to make it smaller and smaller so that it really gets to a nice, you can see the piece is getting much longer every time I put it through. And then if you also notice, my hand is actually kind of see-through through the dough. So once I have that done, now I will roll my pieces back through the cutter, and this will cut it into the fettuccine size. So it goes really quick, really is worth the effort if you have the time to do it. And there's my pasta. So now we're ready to start making our sauce. So I have a pot of water on the stove. I'm going to add my salt. We always want to flavor the water because the water is going to absorb into our pasta. So we want to make sure it's nice and nicely salted. So I'm going to start the sauce at the same time I'm cooking the pasta. I'm dropping the pasta into the pot and stirring it into a boiling water and just making sure I get it all in there. And I'm going to cook it for about 5 to 6 minutes. Now in another pan, I melted my butter. I'm going to add my garlic and just saute that very, very quickly. Your house should be smelling like an Italian restaurant by now. I'm going to add in my cream and my half and half. This is certainly not a recipe if you're on a diet, and this is one that you want to enjoy in moderation, right? There's lots of fat and calories in this, but definitely worth the experience of making it. So now our cream and our half and half is on the stove, and it's starting to come to a boil. So we start to see all those bubbles on the side. And we want to make sure that we bring it to a boil. You can kind of see them there on the side of the pan, how it's bubbling up. We want to bring it to a boil. We're going to add our cracked black pepper in. This really goes well with the fat of the dish. And we want to cook this for a few minutes and allow the cream to reduce. So it's going to get thicker by us boiling it. Just be careful, it might bubble up and over if you're not in the right size pan. So when you see that happening, you can just give it a little whisk and knock the bubbles down. In the meantime, my pasta is ready, so I'm going to start taking the pasta out. I'm always going to save some of my pasta water because if I need to thin out my sauce, if it gets too thick, we'll just use the pasta water to do that. So I'll just set my pasta aside. It's just going to be another minute or so here. Now I'm going to turn my flame off, and then I'm going to add the cheese in. So I want to cook the sauce on a very either low or no flame. I don't want to boil it again. Do not boil it again because if you do, it will separate, and if it separates, it's going to get very greasy. So just on a very low or no flame, depending on how hot it is, you want to just melt the cheese. And what you'll notice is that your sauce is going to start to really thicken and look really nice and creamy. So you can take a spoon and see that it coats the back of the spoon. And then if you just draw your finger through it and it holds that line, this is called nappe. And nappe means that it is coating the back of a spoon. It is at the proper consistency that we need it to be for our pasta. Now I'm going to add that fresh pasta back in. I'm just going to give it a little toss and make sure that I'm coating all of that nice creamy sauce all over the pasta. You can taste and re-season if needed. Then I'll just take some pasta and I'll twirl it and kind of pile it up. Add a little extra cheese, some parsley if you have, and even if you want to add some protein, I added some sauteed shrimp here, and enjoy your dish. And don't forget to follow us. We are LICHS Culinary on both YouTube and on Instagram. So make sure you follow us and like us, subscribe, and get those notifications.